How's it going, everyone? Scott McKay here at Createx Colors. We're going to be doing a cool project today. We're going to do some skulls and a little bit realistic fire, all done in yellow and orange tones on this orange panel that's been based out and cleared, sanded, ready for us to go. So we're going to use one of my pack of skulls pieces. We're going to use the Look Up. This is from set 1. We'll mix in some curves, some texture effects, little pocket graphs, a little bit of everything to make this happen. First thing we're going to start out with, we're going to go with an opaque yellow. Then we're going to go into a candy orange and some other candies that I mixed up, one called Dirty Penny and one called Espresso Shot. We'll talk about how I mix that up. I'm going to balance all those colors to make a really cool project. So we're going to get started. All right, first thing we're going to do, we're going to take our stencil. The pack of skulls has positive, negative, everything, and some extra stuff around the outside, which we don't want to get in our painting. So in order to fix that, really simple, we're going to put this on our board. Orient the position we want. You can take the actual skull first and kind of figure out the angle you're going to want it at. And then just line this up into place. And we're going to tape it into position. And what I like to do, if we can find the edge of the tape, sometime, there it is. So it's going to tape off all this extra, all these little details here. Just kind of put a perimeter around it. Really quick and easy. Just enough to keep it down. And what I like to do is I curl up these edges, so you're not using a ton of tape to back mask. You can just take a piece of tape and just roll it. And what this is going to do is when you're spraying, the overspray is going to hit the tape and come off instead of getting onto the surface and getting stuck to the surface. Then you have all these lines, of stuff you don't want there. It's a really simple trick. Well, you can just take paper and fold it up too, but that should be enough. You're kind of just making just a deflector. Super, super easy. What I got here is I got the opaque yellow mixed with about 20% of the 40-50. This makes it bite a little bit better on the metal and it dries a little quicker so I can get that, that nice flood stroke I do with the fire you'll see as I go through it. And all I'm going to do here is I'm really just going to fog this in just for registration. It's going to be hotter at the front, so more fire than it's going to come off. So I don't want to really get a ton back here because the fire is going to come off this skull and kind of twist. So I'm mainly going to hit the front. The first pass I usually put down a little on the light side, not too wet. And then the second pass I can go a little stronger. Remember, you can always add more paint. It's harder to take it away. So you can build your paint slowly as you go. So what I like to do for this is just kind of come in here, and I'm not flooding it right to the edge. I'm kind of staying maybe an eighth off the edge and letting the overspray get, that way I don't have a really harsh line. And I can usually just kind of peel a section back and check it. Make sure I got enough. Yeah, that's enough. We'll go one stronger coat on the front. And if I did my job right, I should have very little to no overspray on the outside, which I don't. I got a little bit right there, but that was pretty much just a little dust. So really simple. Now I have, a place where I can put the skull for detail, but I'm not going to do this yet. I'm going to kind of map out where the fire is going to go. When you're doing fire, the realistic fire, is you want to keep it very loose at the start, and then you tighten as you go. And you want to let the fire roll. At the base, the fire should be stronger, and as it dissipates from the source, it'll narrow out or squiggle and taper. But you shouldn't have like a bigger fire back here and small at the front. It should always taper. So I kind of sketch at this point. I just kind of map out and figure out how I want this fire to go. Really loose, and kind of keep it condensed, and I can always build out from there. I'm going to put a little bit around, a little glow. It's going to have a glow coming off. I don't rely on the stencils too much at this point. That's usually to tighten things up as I go. You keep it really loose because remember, you can always tighten it up. And by adding that 40-30 in here, when I get to these like little areas of sparks, I can do these flood strokes, and when we tighten up on the video a little bit more, you'll see it better. It doesn't always have to connect. You can have another offshoot here. Just kind of plan it out. Definitely study some fire, look at pictures and light sources and how you want to move, and you can find all sorts of ways to do it and kind of develop your own style for it. My style has been developed by lots of different people in the industry, including Mike LaValle and all sorts of guys who, pioneered versions of this, and eventually you develop your own style, your own build, and your own process. This is just a sketch right at this point. By keeping it loose, you can really play with it and have fun, and you're not backing yourself into a corner by overly structuring it or overly stenciling it. Plenty of time for that. And that's kind of the map out where I stop. From there, I'm going to look at it, and then I'm going to start figuring out my details, and we'll work it from there. We'll get a little closer on this, and we'll keep going. All right, so we got our layout here, basically set up. I'm going to go through a few more, tighten up some things I like. When I find something I like, then I kind of do a heavier flood stroke and kind of start building and defining the shape. Again, I haven't used the stencil yet, but I'm setting up that curl and the twist. Just kind of figuring it out. Most of it's going to get pushed back and get dark, so again, I don't have to be too worried about what I'm doing here. I can still have time to play with it and change it and make it work. I don't mind having this fog there because I'm going to candy over it and it's just going to be an orangey glow, because we're going to come back in, we're going to go to orange and then pull it back, pull the brights back with the same color. Okay, I'm going to switch out brushes here. In this one, I have the Grabber Orange mixed in. Grabber Orange is mixed with 1:1 40-50 with the Grabber Orange candy. No reducer. And we're just going to go straight into it. And I'm going to line this guy up. And here's the key to stencils. Don't flood the paint in there and make a super hard edge. You just want to softly register everything. By softly registering it, you have plenty of time to keep adding and defining the tones and building it and just letting it come to life. So I know the top of the nose is pretty dark, top of the eyes are pretty dark, so I can get those in now. And I just kind of set it up. And just kind of work it. So see how now you don't even see the back of the skull much. It's just there a little bit. I can register it in here just so it's kind of defined. We'll probably tone it back out. And now this is where I can start going over this whole thing, and I can kind of fog over it and push that orange, push that yellow layer back. Notice I'm not washing the whole thing with a ton of color. I'm being strategic where I put it. I'm usually putting it to the outer edges and kind of carrying the overspray in and just letting it tone. And by doing that, it's almost creating a drop shadow as well. But now that this color is down, the next layer of yellow will have a darker color to bounce off of. This is also a good time in the skull if you want to put a little texture in. These little texture effect stencils are great. This is a perfect time to put it in. It's early on. And again, if you put too much, it's not a big deal. You're going to be going back through and adding more highlights and lights and darks and midtones. So just slowly build it out. I could probably push the skull a little darker now. I'll eventually switch to my darker color, but for now, we can keep building with this tone until we're happy. And there's extra details here, like where the temple is and the eyebrows. Those, I don't put a lot of paint there. I just mist it in just for, like basically overspray, just for registration, because I can come in and tone off that. And this is kind of the middle ground. I love doing tone on tone, like blue fire on blue panels, red on red, you know, green on greens or on black. It's actually a faster way, I found it's a faster way to learn it, because you're not switching through so many color changes, you're staying in one color family. And I kind of like where that's toned. I think that's kind of got enough where I can start pushing back some details. I'm going to bring up the highlights again and kind of get a push-pull in the midtones. So I'm going to switch back to my yellow. And with this one, I'm going to untape the stencil, because on the outer edge of the stencil is different parts of the skull. Like here is the upper eye. So now if I want to highlight that upper edge and pull that back in, I can just come off that and bring that back in. Here's the other one. So that just come in. Now I can flip and rotate. The longer you mess with these stencils, the more you'll see all the positive, negative of everything. So now I can redefine that and come off that cheekbone. Come off there. And let's put a hot spot right there. Just bring that right up. And then we'll bring out the nose. The nose, when you define the nose, that really sets the depth of the skull. And it just pushes that out, and you rotate it again. And there's the bottom. Highlight those cheekbones, a little core highlight. Again, I'm keeping it loose here, and that fire can come right off. And we'll start working a new set. When I work a new set, I don't trace out what I've already done. I'm making a new set like this. And this is where I'll start bringing the stencil more. And I'll start defining that set. Maybe how this one curves down this way. And just let it flow. Maybe this one jumps over that. So, you know, that fire layer is still there underneath, but it's allowing this one to pop off. So if you didn't do this one wouldn't pop off the same. So even though by the end you might not see this section, it's defining what's above it. So for these bigger areas, I use bigger templates. When I start getting to the smaller details, I'll start going to like the pocket graphic size templates. And again, I could even add in some texture again with this. And just letting this kind of build. These little flood dagger strokes really gives it a lot of life. Just let it flow. As long as you don't do too much too fast, you won't overwork it, and you'll always be able to kind of pull it back to what you want. I've had fire jobs where halfway through I didn't like it, and then I worked it through the end and ended up loving it. So fire is one of those things you got to really see it through to the end and just let it kind of happen. And I still haven't put any reducer in here. This is all straight, and this is running through the custom CS. Once I start getting deep down to details, I'll probably reduce the paint a little bit, 5% intervals, until I'm happy with its flow. But right now I want that build. I want to be able to build the tone fast so I don't over reduce it. And I think that's looking pretty cool. I think at this point we'll start getting it a little tighter. Here's the little pocket graphics ones. This is where I start getting into some of the smaller areas, the smaller fire. I'll do more of that as I get down to the end. We're going to give this a little glowing eye inside. Just a little freehand, kind of soft dagger stroke. We'll start highlighting these teeth a little bit. Just soft dagger strokes, same thing. Let the fire come out of there. Cool, digging it. So you just let that kind of continue to roll, and you go from a loose stroke to a fade, and then tighten it up. And that'll really help you keep a natural flow to the fire. All right, now that we got that all set, I got my kind of mid-tone in. I'm still gonna go with my grabber orange to tone this out, but I'm gonna go to a darker color I made up called Dirty Penny, which is 3 parts grabber orange, 1 part dirt track brown, and it creates a darker version of the grabber orange to start detailing. So you get more ability to tone it out. So I'm gonna start with the regular orange. I'm gonna be more selective where I tone. And at this point, I put about 5% reducer, 4011 reducer, into the candy. So I can tone it softer and slower. So it's not covering as fast because I don't want it to cover as fast. But see, it's just toning that back. I'll come back through, make sure I like everything here. And I'm just letting this stuff work down here because I can do little kind of strokes off the base color orange. Because when it's cleared, it's just going to give more tone to the piece. But notice, very little stencil here. I think the biggest mistake I made when I started, and other people make, is overuse the stencil and you end up getting that kind of Swiss cheese look to your fire. So if you use it sparingly, you'll actually be much happier with it. Okay, I'm going to switch out to this next color, which is called Dirty Penny, which may not look super different on camera, but in person you can definitely see the difference. And this is where I'll start going in. See how much richer that is? It's darker right off the gate. So I don't want to overuse the stencil here. I'm just going to tone some of it. And we'll maybe put a little details in here because this is the upper palate of the skull, of the upper jaw. I'm just going to add those little lines in there. And then I'm going to lightly mist where the teeth go. See that? I barely touched it. It's just enough to know where they are so I can freehand connect them. We'll go dark under here. See, the color's just enough to set it off and be different without pushing it too far. Remember, like I said at the beginning, it's easier to add paint than it is to take it away. So that's why I like to switch these colors up. You can kind of register, again, some of the outer sections of the skull. just to define that edge where it is in space and work off it. We're going to freehand the fire right back off that anyway. I'm going to get this outside edge a little bit more defined too, almost like that drop shadow, so it sets them off the page a little bit more. And again, if I do anything darker, that's just going to set up for the fire layer to pop off the orange. Doing fire, realistic fire, things like that is always a push-pull. Okay, so when I go in for the detail, this is where I'm probably I might reduce it a little bit more as I start getting down to the final details, but this is running really good. This is where I start taking this stencil look out of it by shading off that detail with some core shadows. Blending that back. I think I'm going to add about 5% more reducer to it. I'll let that sit for a sec, and then we'll come back in and finish all this. Okay, so I just put a little bit more reducer, about 5%, just to tone it a little bit more and thin it. So when I get to these finer details, then I'll play with a little pressure on it, so I don't get too many blowouts. Once you get it dialed in, you don't have to worry about blowouts and things like that. So what I want to do now is I want to take this stencil edge out by freehanding off some of these lines, and we'll put some little bone texture in, some little cracks. See how nice that's flowing? Just that little bit of reducer is all it took to achieve the details I want. And for this one, I'm using the I want a CH, which this runs a I think a 0.30, 0.35 nozzle. We'll go off these eyebrows a little bit. Core shadow above. I have one more color darker that I'm going to use for final detail. Just to do the final darks, we'll get there. The nose, I just came off that edge and up, and that creates that septum in the middle. And then down off that edge. And then come off this eye. Remember, I'm going to be putting I'll be putting more fire highlights in this later, so again, it's that push-pull. We're going to do a lot more little details and stuff, so I'm just really setting this up. Another good time to put maybe some other texture in here. Find a little section. See that little bit of texture in them? Just gives a little bit of interest in that bone. In here, we'll do the same thing, maybe a little bit bigger. That blends out that stencil edge. This is going to really let the next stage, pop with that fire. Okay, let's go to the cheek here. This is where you can spend as much time or as little time detailing, depending on the overall look you want. If you want the skull to be really loose in the fire, keep it loose, very little detail, or tighten it up. And you could go with bone colors and make it as realistic as you wanted to, or stylize as much as you wanted to, just to really put your own look to it. And when I developed these stencils, I tried to keep the anatomy pretty straightforward, so you could make any changes to the skull shape and maybe add like horns and different stuff to it easy enough. Okay, so now we're going to come up to the part everyone really hates about skulls, is the teeth. So let's get set up here. I want to define these teeth. The palette's pretty dark. We'll get over here, so I define that all out. Now, what I do, once the paint's flowing right, we get everything dark, you have the notch at the bottom, and then you get this little V at the top. I go little dagger strokes up from those, and just meet those sections. I'm not going around like a chiclet. And then from the top, I just kind of loop back and I go up from there as well. And that kind of creates the socket of the teeth. And we're going to put a little more details in later, but by doing it that way, you give yourself the freedom to kind of work those teeth in without trying to like make a whole tooth in a line. You work from the bottom, that bottom dark, and just work your way up. And I got that next darker color that I can work with to pull out any other details. But I'm going to probably brighten some stuff up again. And put a little bit of this color out here. I don't want to put too much of this color because it can start getting muddy out here if it hits too much of the bright yellow. You really want to put the dirty penny like over the oranges and not too much over the yellow so it doesn't get too muddy. Out here, out here. And when you clear this, that's when it's really everything's gonna pop. That's the other thing about doing fire and automotive style painting. If you like it at this stage, when you clear it, you're gonna love it even more because it intensifies everything. Because what I'm going to also do before I go for those final highlights, all this candy, we're going to wash over this with 40/40. That'll lock all the candies in, and it'll stop any bleed from happening because the candy sometimes will bleed into the bright opaque whites or yellows, just because the reducer will reactivate it a little bit. So we'll stop that by putting some 40/40 down, and then we'll go in for those final highlights. So almost there. Just keeping it loose and fun. You can take this video, triple the time, and go in for really, really big details, but it's just an expansion of what we've already done. So I just want to get you guys the gist of it and put your own spin on it.